Right, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. I'm going to do this video in order to cover again this particular topic on the external audit, uh, which is content number 3 in our syllabus. And then these are some of the learning objectives that we have already discussed earlier on when we do our online class earlier on. So I don't have to go through each of these learning objective again. So when we talk about external audits, is identifying in terms of the key opportunities as well as threats confronting an organization. So what we need to do is we need to evaluate the trends and events that beyond the control of a single firm. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to examining in terms of the external elements or external factors that might have an influence towards our organization. It could be in terms of the internet usage, the technological advancement, the social media, and then we talk about the healthy conscious increasing in terms of the healthy conscious among the Malaysians. So that might be an opportunity for some of the goods or products or the companies that we have chosen for our group projects. And then internal threats, maybe in terms of expanding number of competitors in the market, in the industry nowadays. And then in terms of the economy, the COVID-19 might as well pose another level of threats for many forms of businesses. So, like I said earlier on, what we need to do, we need to identify key variables that offer actionable responses lah. For example, like when we talk about internet usage earlier on, the rate of internet usage among Malaysians are increasing. Maybe one of the actionable responses that the company could take is to tap into online businesses, for example. So these are the five forces, broad categories. You need to know this because in the case study, when we start to do the case study, you will be seeing questions that ask you to identify external forces for each of the case lah. So when we talk about external forces, so these are the forces: economic, social, cultural, demographic, natural, environment forces, and then political, governmental, legal, and then technological and competitive forces. And like I said earlier on, each of these forces would influence any of the constituents that relate to our opportunities as well as threats. I'm not going to go through this because we already talked about this when we do our online class. And okay, but I would like to talk about this, the IO perspective. The IO perspective contends that external forces are more important than internal factors in a firm for gaining sustainable competitive advantage. So what they are trying to say is that those managers, those organizations who in favor of industrial organizational perspective, they will focus more on the industry factors or the external factors because they believe that these factors could help you to gain sustainable competitive advantage. For example, we talk about economies of scale. There are some companies who would go for cost leadership. They would go for cost leadership in which they will try to produce their goods in large quantities and through the economies of scale because they believe, this is my take on the drawing of the economies of scale, forgive me, on the drawing. So they believe that if they are able to obtain or to get these economies of scale through their experience, and later on they are able to minimize down, to bring down the cost, and then they would be able to extend in terms of the number of quantities. So if they are able to do this, so you can have that competitive advantage because of why? Because your cost is much cheaper than the rest of the competitors, so you are able to sell your product at a much lower prices. So that is what we mean by economies of scale. barriers to market entry, kita cakap pasal Walt Disney, Disneyland, and then theme park macam Sunway Lagoon. It would require huge amount of capital kalau kita nak identify a new competitor. So that also would create a barriers to market entry. So that is why macam Sunway Lagoon, they are willing to spend millions of ringgit in order to build up a theme park which are hard, difficult to be challenged by any new competitor. And then sometimes we go for product differentiation. It's different. Contoh macam Apple, they have iOS, and so as long as they own that iOS, kan, people will always be captured or get hold to their product ataupun their product lines, and then the economy and level of competition. So I'm not going to talk about all of this. You can read these all of these slides on the factors, which some of these factors might relate with some of your group projects or the companies that you have chosen for your group project. I will talk about this a little bit again. The five forces model of competition. So if you are doing a business and then you are planning to go into a particular business, for example, so maybe perhaps by understanding the five forces model of competition, so this might help you to identify what are the things that you need to do about your businesses. For example, rivalry among competing firms. If there are too many competitors, you know that the market share would be a little bit smaller because there are many players. So what you need to do, you need to differentiate. You need to come up with something new, something that has never been done before. Then only you can gain market share in that particular industry. And then when you know that the bargaining power of consumers is high because they can switch between the product from one brand to another brand at no cost to them, so you know that you cannot simply change the price. Your price need to be competitive as the rest of the competitors in the market. And then kalau kita tahu bargaining power of supplier, kita pun you need to know the bargaining power of supplier. In terms of the quantity of the suppliers and reliability of the suppliers within that industry. If there are many suppliers, so we know that the bargaining power of suppliers is low. But when the suppliers are limited, they have the power. So they can control the price, they can control the delivery and everything. They know that we don't have any other options in order to get the raw materials. So in that situation, they have high bargaining power. And then potential entry of new competitors. If the cost to get into the competition, into the industry is high, macam theme park tadi, kan? So potential entry of new competitors would be low. Kan? So low competitors, not of new competitors. Kan? But if the potential entry is low, like cendol businesses that we talked about earlier on, so there is potentially we might encounter a new competitor in the industry. And finally, potential development of substitute products. You need to know, is there any substitute to your products? If there is no product that you offer to the, if the product that you offer to the customer is not there, can the customer switch to a different substitute? So if there is a substitute, then you know that you cannot simply change the price because that would force your customer to switch to your substitute. And then the rest of this you can and the most important, the most powerful of the five forces is the rivalry among the competing firms lah. Because of these factors, you need to ask first before you go into that particular industry. So just now, earlier on, when we have our online class, Faris asked a good question. How can we make estimation on the EFE analysis? So maybe one of the answer, what I can answer for that, the answer that I could provide for that particular question is yes, it is forecast. And sometimes we need to make an educated assumptions about future trends and events, and we know that the forecast, the forecast is not going to be perfect. So best present estimates of the impact of major external factors over which manager has little, if any, control, but which may exert a significant impact on performance or the ability to achieve desired results. So what we are doing is we are making assumptions on the weightage when we talk about the EFE and just now. So when we talk about the EFE, so these are one of the example of the EFE. You come out with your opportunities and threats, and then number one, we put on the weight. Like I told you before, the weight is all based on assumptions, and maybe the weight is whether or not this factor is important. Yes, new customers is important, of course, and then TBD expanding is also important, and then major competitors also important because when the major competitor across town recently closed, meaning that the customers in this particular across town, they might come to your cinema, so they give like 0.08. So the clue is when you add all of this weight together, it must come down to 1.00. And then you put on the rating is in terms of the response of your company towards that particular factor. For example, we can see that they put four in terms of the trend towards healthy eating, eroding concession sales. Maybe what this cinema is doing, they are also providing or selling healthy types of goods ataupun food in their concession and in the cinema. And so that is how they are responding. If that is what they are doing, that's why they give like a 4 rating here, and then 1 if the response is very very poor, 2 if it is average, and then 3 if it is above average, and then we multiply between the weight and as well as the rating. So this will give you the weighted score for this cinema complex, which is 2.58. So this is the value that you need to get hold on, and then when we go into different tools, we are going to use this value to plot into the IE matrix. And then in the slide as well, the end of the slide, they talk about the industry analysis, competitive profile matrix. So sometimes what we can do is we can we can perform this competitive profile matrix to identify firms' major competitors and their strengths and weaknesses in relations to a sample firm strategic position. Critical success factors include internal and external issues. So if we look at this, this is the example competitive profile matrix. And then how can we get these critical success factors? Sometimes you can get this from the journal lah. And so the same weighting, the same approach, kita letak weight, and then each of the weight must carry up to 1.00. And then we classify in terms of the rating here. 1 as major weakness, 2 minor weakness, 3 minor strength, 4 as a major strength. So for each of these critical success factors, we try to compare, make different differentiate between 3 different companies, and this is what they are going to get. Dalam final exam dulu dia pernah keluar soalan macam ni, and dia tanya, the question is for the students to answer, and which of these companies is a better company as compared to the rest, and then why. So the answer is of course company 1, because they are doing better in terms of their total profile matrix as compared to company 2 and company 3, and because dia punya profile metric is 3.15. And then when we look at each of the factors, and they have major strengths in many of these factors as compared to the rest. And then one of the area yang dia orang boleh improve is on advertising. They are good, but they are not good in terms of advertising and market share. Maybe they need to penetrate the market more in order for them to improve in terms of their rating as compared to company 2 and company 3. So that's how you interpret the competitive profile metric. So that is the end of the chapter, and I wish you all the best. And Assalamualaikum. If you have any question, please do not hesitate to ask me during our next online class. Peace.